Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life.
And how you doing? How you living? How you feeling, folks? Back for another episode of City Night Lights. Now, of course, I'm your host. My name's Zach, and I'm glad to be back as always to talk to you guys about a little bit of baseball. So I won't waste too much time. We'll just get right into it. And the Mets, they had a beautiful week this week. They went 5-1 against the White Sox and the Rockies. Now, I know you might be sitting there going, oh, we should have been 6-0, the worst two teams in the league. Well, you know what? They might be terrible, but still, regardless, 5-1, I'll take it. Glad to see them taking care of business. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the batting, the pitching. We'll get into some injury news. But first off, I'm going to start off with a little bit of schedule talk. So our upcoming teams we got over the next three series are going to be the Dodgers, the Rockies, and the Nationals. Now, Dodgers series is going to be tough. I'm excited to see what that type of baseball looks like, especially Dodgers coming off a rather dangerous series against the Yankees. So I'm very intrigued to see how that's going to, shake out for the Mets. And then we play the Rockies again, which I'm not worried about. And then I feel like the Red Hot Nationals, a team that's played pretty above their belt this year. So we'll see how that series goes. I feel like that'll be a lot of fun. But we'll get right into the Mets batting this week. And I will say, Soto looked good this week. He hit a couple home runs. Felt like he was taking good swings. He looked comfortable. So I was glad to see Soto, kind of taking care of business, doing what he needs to do, doing what he does best. That was good to see. Lindor, he's been balling, having a great series. Had a great last week. I think he had like 2 or 3 home runs. He's been playing phenomenal. It's good to see Lindor just this good this early. I really am intrigued. I'm intrigued to see where it goes the rest of the season. Are we going to get potentially MVP Lindor? I hope so. That'd be really cool. But we'll keep it moving. Talk about Pete a little bit. Pete's been he's been picking it up again. I know he had that home runless run for a little bit, and now he's hitting a couple home runs again. But I'm very intrigued to see how he plays the rest of the season. But I do like that he's back in the swing of things, as one may say. But yeah, I glad to see Pete hitting home runs against Colorado. Unfortunately, not the game I bet on, but regardless, still glad to see him hitting home runs and having a good time. And then two guys I'd also like to shout out are going to be Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil. They've been playing pretty well. I'm glad to see him out there, both playing well, both really contributing. McNeil more so than Nimmo. I expected out of Nimmo, and McNeil, I don't know what to expect, but I'm glad to see him, playing corner outfielders, playing center field when we need a guy, hitting decently. So it's been nice to see McNeil really contributing again. And then, we'll talk about the pitching a little bit. The pitching's been fine. That's really all I can say. I mean, they were perfect to start April, and of course they're not going to be perfect now. They're still playing pretty good. I would definitely argue above their belt as well. Guys like Griffin Canning, who led the league last year and just giving up runs. But I like this pitching staff. We've done great so far. There's not a knack to be said, and I feel like we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more as we progress into the injury news, because obviously, a lot of big names there. Very, very intriguing to see where they're at in terms of progress, but very happy with the pitching staff. Jeremy Hefner is a phenomenal world-class pitching coach for the Mets, and David Stearns and Stevie Cohen have just somehow figured this out. Now we'll get into the injury news, and first guy we'll talk about is Sean Manaea, and actually good news out of here, just threw his first BP against live hitters on May 29th. So that was great, and we're going to see him throw one more live BP before he gets a minor league rehab. And of course, that minor league rehab is going to be a little bit extensive. It might take a full month. So I would say expect to see him potentially coming back end of June, early July. I think that's definitely going to be the timetable on Manaea. And really the most realistic stuff would definitely be I think first week of July. Now, we'll go into the next guy, and next guy we're going to see pretty soon. That's going to be Paul Blackburn. He's actually going to be starting on June 2nd versus the Los Angeles Dodgers. First game coming back, I believe, off of an elbow injury, but it'll be good to see Paul Blackburn get back into the rotation. Just another arm, somebody to give some of the good guys a couple days off. Obviously, they just been having a hard time getting through the 6th inning. It would be nice to maybe get these guys a little extra rest. Maybe they get a little extra juice to get past the 6th into the 7th, past potentially the 7th, which would be crazy for Mets pitchers. But that would be quite awesome. So just glad to see another pitcher back in the rotation, kind of helping everybody out. Now we'll talk about Montas. Montas just went on his second rehab start so far. It seems like he's going to be going on his third rather shortly. That's awesome. It looks like Montas's timetable is going to be a lot shorter. Granted, still don't expect it back relatively soon. Definitely going to take a couple weeks, maybe 1 or 2. So I would argue just be wary of that. And then, a bad sign out of the outfield for us. Jesse Winker hasn't resumed baseball activity since he's been put on the IL on May 4th. I'm very intrigued to see kind of what's going on with that oblique, but doesn't seem to be a lot of news. So just wanted to keep you guys keep your expectations tempered on Jesse Winker. I don't know when he's going to be coming back, but maybe see him just later in the season, past the trade deadline, maybe August. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look like we're getting much news for the Winker side of this thing. Now we'll move on to the next guy. It's surprise. Someone who fractured their left tibia, Jose Siri, has actually just taken BP against Sean Manaea, which unbelievably doing other baseball activities as well, reportedly. So I'm surprised that Jose Siri's come back as quickly as he has from this fractured tibia. Obviously, that's a major injury that you don't just come back from that fast. But I would love to see Siri back in the lineup this year. Guy adds a lot of pop, plays a great defensive center fielder, and obviously has a ton of speed on the base paths. So very intrigued to see if we're going to be able to get Jose Siri back this year. And then last guy that no one's really talked about all too much this year, someone the Mets signed late into the season, April 29th, Brooks Raley. He's been on the Mets. He's actually healthy. He did have an injury last year that caused him to be signed late. It might have been Tommy John. I generally don't remember. But the Mets have re-signed him, and it looks like reportedly he's healthy. And he just can't come off the IL. He's not eligible because he was on the 60-day until June 28th. Now, I think the Mets are going to be able to take him on. Hopefully, if he's pitching well, he's going to be a phenomenal lefty reliever for the Mets to add to a righty-dominated bullpen. It's going to be very exciting if the Mets can get him back. I really hope that we get the same reliever that we once had, but obviously, I really do think he had Tommy John. I will look this up also as we continue to talk here, but he just had a phenomenal Mets tenure, and I would really like to see Brooks Raley just, come back and play the way he had played for the Mets prior to the injury. Now, let's see. Brooks Raley injury. Yeah, okay, he had Tommy John surgery. Yeah, good to know. Tommy John. Fun. But yeah, it looks like, that's all I really had to talk about with you guys this week. Not too long of an episode. Just wanted to go over some of the weekly stuff, a couple things here and there. But yeah, that's all. Glad I got to talk to you guys. And with that being said, take it easy. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you guys for coming out and listening. And stay idiotic.